Well, thank you everyone for joining Body Ecology Living podcast today. And I have a special guest. I've known her for a very long time, it seems, even though we don't really, well, she lives in Australia and I don't live there, but we've known about each other's work even longer than we have known each other. And we don't talk that often, but we kind of follow each other's work. And we thought it would be really fun to do a podcast. So Tess Masters is known as the Blender Girl, and she has, well, I mean, just an amazing resume. I'm going to just read it. She's a very high in demand spokesperson, and she is a recipe developer, and I want to talk about that, some challenges for her. But she's been in all kinds of places, like magazines, like Real Simple, In Style, Prevention, Cosmopolitan, Shape, Glamour, Clean Eating, Yoga Journal, Vegetarian Times. And the reason, she's so popular, the topic that she's an expert in, which is on blenders, recipes like smoothies made in a blender. And by the way, she's a spokesperson for Vitamix. That's the blender she promotes.
Oh, no, not anymore. I haven't been
No,
doing that for
anyway.
years. No,
Oh,
no, 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 no.
well, do you have one you promote?
Well, I mean, I love Vitamix. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
KitchenAid makes a great mid-range blender, but no, I'm not affiliated with any blender company anymore.
Oh, okay, good. We'll clear that up right from the start. Anyway, she's a real expert on smoothies and using the blender to make things. And I have wanted to have this conversation with her for years, really, because I love certain things about smoothies. One thing is that they are, actually made a list. First of all, I always prefer them over smoothies because they have more fiber in them. And also, I think it's a great way to, get a lot of nutrients in one drink. You can, if unless you put certain ingredients in there, but you can make up 2 mornings worth and drink some of it, like say on Monday, and then Tuesday morning, you drink it again. So it can be very convenient. But I have some issues with it too, and how people are making it. So when we started connecting with each other, I said, "Well, what should we talk about?" Because we don't want to do a whole podcast just on smoothies. And she loved the idea, which I do too, of the bio-individuality. In other words, it's what I've been saying for 30 years, the principle of uniqueness, because everybody agrees with that now in functional medicine. We're very unique. And, it was a new concept before. And we are very individual because we have different genes, we have different infections going on in our body. We might live in a really hot climate like Hawaii, or right now, Tess is down in Australia, so it's winter there, right? It's
Hmm.
cold. Yeah, but I'm in hot Charleston, South Carolina, so it's very hot, over 90 degrees today. So, we're going to be drawn to certain foods. Like I would need a smoothie that would cool my body. And she, might, I don't know if it's even possible to do this, but can you make a smoothie that warms you up? Or
Yeah,
should you,
yeah,
is it a
yes,
summer food?
yes. So no, well, I mean, that is one of the biggest questions that I get. How do
Hmm.
I enjoy smoothies and juices and not feel damp and cold? So this is a
That's,
really, really popular question because different foods have different thermal properties. So we have naturally cooling foods, there's warming foods, and then there's foods that are sort of more neutral in thermal temperature. So there's no doubt that most fruits are cooling, and so it's very hydrating and all that sort of stuff. But there are certain ingredients that you can be mindful about adding to your smoothies that naturally warm the body. So
mm,
my favorite one is ginger. So that
yeah, good
naturally
point.
warms the body.
Yeah,
Cinnamon
great.
naturally warms the body. Fennel is another one of my favorites. It naturally warms the body. And then you've got all your chilies, right? So you've got, I like to put a pinch of cayenne pepper or some green chili, some jalapeno or serrano. You can put red pepper flakes, things like that, right? So I think that there are ways that you can add ingredients to smoothies so that they don't cool your body as much. I'm also a huge fan of making savory smoothies. So making basically they're gazpachos, aren't they? Right? They're ostensibly cold soups, right? So Because I don't tend to eat a lot of fruit, I will lean more towards savory smoothies. The other really important thing about when you're developing your own smoothie recipes and what you're putting into the blender is, I think that one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they put too much fruit in the smoothie. So, we can't absorb so much sugar at any one time. It hits our bloodstream so quickly. And so we want to sort of put the brakes on the assimilation of the sugars, right? So you want to make sure that you're balancing your fruit smoothie with some protein and healthy fats. So you could do that by adding some nuts and seeds, right? So adding a little bit of blanched slivered almonds is one of my favorite things because they're more alkaline forming. Adding a tablespoon of chia seeds or hemp seeds or flax seeds, adding a half of an avocado is a healthy fat. Adding some, coconut yogurt would be a healthy fat that's also fermented, adding probiotics and things like that, right? So I think that, the nuts and seeds add some protein. You're getting some amino acids with the coconut and the avocado, but I do think that it's a really important thing to consider when you're making your smoothies.
So, how can you give me an example of a savory smoothie? And also, I just wanted to throw in there when you were thinking of different ingredients. I don't recommend almonds and almonds butter because they're so high in oxalates, and I definitely want to talk about that in a little while. But sunflower butter, sun butter, I don't know if you have it over there, but we have sun butter, and I've talked to the company. They don't have oxalates. It's been tested, and children with autism are extremely sensitive to oxalates, and they don't have a problem with sun butter. So maybe a tablespoon of that could be a nice,
Yes, sun butter is great. So I remember when sun butter first came out, it's an amazing thing. When I used to speak at the food allergy conferences and be a lot in that world, and still, a lot of people come to my website because it's free of a lot of the allergen causing foods, right? So yes, sun butter is a great nut-free, almond-free, oxalate-free option for
and
sure.
it tastes good.
It
Have to
tastes
add that.
Yeah, it tastes great. And sunflower seeds, are great for magnesium and other things, right? So yeah, that's a great option. In terms of a savory smoothie, oh gosh, obviously, if you're sensitive to nightshades, this is not a good option. But if you are not sensitive to nightshades and they're not pro-inflammatory for you, then obviously tomato is a very popular thing as a base, right? So it's tomatoes, cucumbers, spinach or bok choy, kale. I know you were talking about oxalates, so you want to be choosing some of the lower oxalate greens, such as baby bok choy or something like that. Baby bok choy is not something that people typically think about adding to a smoothie, but it is so great because it's really mild in flavor. So if you were to grab for collard greens or some of the more really assertive greens, it can get pretty muddy, what I call sort of earthy, and gritty pretty quickly, right? And you want to lift it. So I think that those are good options. I always cream it with some avocado, just to get, some of that glutathione and all of those beautiful antioxidants and healthy fats and, monounsaturated fats and all that beautiful stuff. So I would cream it with some avocado because if you add carrot, for example, it can add quite a mealy texture, even in a high-speed blender, right? So I like to add some carrot. If you don't have a high-speed blender, grating the carrot so that it's not as mealy is a really great option. Then I like to add some spice. So I talked about adding a little bit of chili, adding some, red pepper flakes or a little bit of cayenne pepper, which we know stimulates hydrochloric acid. It's really good as a prebiotic. But in addition to that, a really big thing that I think is a great tip for smoothies is adding lemon or lime zest or lemon or lime juice, which we
Mhm.
also know is alkaline forming, but it helps to lift and brighten the flavors. And then what's really important is we talked about smoothies during the winter. So this is a little bit counterintuitive, but you have to make them cold because our taste buds are temperature sensitive. We can't taste the full dimension of flavors at extremely hot or extremely cold temperatures. So that works against us somewhat when we're making soups, for example. You know, you would never season your soup and finish and add herbs right when it's piping hot off the stove, because you can't get your mouth around the full spectrum of flavors. With smoothies, that phenomenon works for us in our favor, because it really lifts the earthiness and the pungent flavor of really, really assertive ingredients, right? Like beets, like murky greens and things like that I'm talking about. So you can sort of really layer your flavors. I have to say that, you know, I will add, like I said, fennel. I will add, you know, onion. I will add a clove of raw garlic. I mean, there's all kinds of things that you can do. I will add fresh herbs, so basil, cilantro, mint, parsley, a big favorite of mine. Sometimes I'll add rosemary. I mean, there's all kinds of things. So if you think about, basically it's just liquefied food, right? So if you think about the flavor profiles of your favorite dishes, you can start to add those ingredients into a smoothie, right? But where the experience and the sort of experimentation comes in is that you're not cooking it. And even when you are heating it with the friction heat of the blades, you know, when you're heating a soup in a high-speed blender, for example, you're not actually still cooking the food. So the meshing of the flavors doesn't take place, so that the amounts and the quantities, the way that you do it, is a little bit different. But I think it's one of those things where I actually went to this hilarious event where they had 10 people on the panel, and they all made the most disgusting smoothie they could possibly put together. Like undrinkable, plug your nose. There's no way I'm ever going to be able to drink this kind of smoothie, right? And my challenge was I had to go around and I had to improve and make the smoothie drinkable so that everybody would drink it. And
That is a
there isn't a
challenge.
smoothie that, yeah, but there isn't a smoothie you can't do that to. So that's what's really cool about it, is when you start to, you know, and in the Blender Girl Smoothies book, there's a whole chart for how you can do this, right? How you layer your flavors and make them taste good and that kind of stuff, right? But I think it's a formula, and the more you do it, the better you get at it, right? Just like anything in life. But I think what I love about smoothies is it just levels the playing field in the kitchen, right? It just makes healthy fast food possible. It's really easy. It's literally child's play. A child, you know, a teenager can do it. It's fabulous. But
Well,
the other big thing I will say is you have to sip them slowly. Like a lot of us are gulping our smoothie, which leads to all kinds of digestive issues, blood sugar spikes and crashes, all that sort of stuff, gas, bloating. A lot of people feel very bloated after they drink smoothies, and that can be for a number of reasons, like too much fruit, too much sugar, like I was talking about, but also just drinking them way too fast. So I think just, you know, swishing the liquids around in your mouth, because remember, the first phase of digestion begins in our mouth. We want the salivary amylase to get around those carbohydrates. So I think there is some things to just keep in mind, but like I said, just practice, 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 and you just get better at it.
well, would you add probiotic powders like I do? And also, I add things like we have a new product called Echo Bloom, and it's a prebiotic. Well, it's actually three unique ingredients that make a great prebiotic. So they're going to feed the bacteria. But we also have a drink. It's actually it's a powerful probiotic made there in Australia, and it's cocoa biotic and energy biotic and all. But I'll put in like a quarter of a cup of that, and you're getting an extraordinary probiotic, and it's easy. You almost don't even know it's in there, but I think it's a good thing to do.
Totally. So yeah, I mean, we can talk about how to add, you know, fermented foods and probiotics and prebiotics. I mean, that's a great thing to do. So I love, you know, I'll add coconut water kefir. I love your cocoa biotic. I love adding, you know, some probiotic powder. You know, there's all kinds of, oh gosh, if you want to get to the next level about what you can do to increase the nutrient density, and the gut health promoting qualities of your smoothie. Yeah, I mean, of course. So adding a little bit of that is amazing. I think another thing that's really, really powerful is adding a tablespoon of green banana flour, because it adds resistant starch, which helps with our butyrate production, which in turn helps with our GLP-1 production, which in turn helps with our blood sugar regularity, our insulin, optimizing our insulin, you know, sensitivity, and that in turn helps with, you know, our hormone production. So I think that's another big one that I would recommend, that I really, really love. It's totally different than adding a banana, right? So bananas are very high in sugar. A lot of people are very sensitive to those. They cause gas and bloating, particularly in the Body Ecology ecology community, we don't consume them, particularly for people, on body ecology stage 1 and 2. But green banana flour is a different thing, right? So I think that can be a good thing. Obviously, high quality unsweetened yogurts, depending on what your dietary preferences are, I think those can be great. But yeah, I love, look, I have to say that I will even add beet kvass. I will even add sauerkraut juice. I'll add kimchi juice from my homemade kimchi. So that's a really great thing to do with a smoothie. I will drink those as tonics as well, which are amazing. But yeah, that's a great thing to add. Those are all great things to add to
And,
smoothies.
so up until now, I'm sure people listening to this only thought of smoothies as being something sweet, like a dessert almost. There are smoothie franchises all over. You can even walk into most Whole Foods and see the smoothie bar. But when you look up there on the menu, even if you get to make your own, they're very fruit based. Now, I did want to okay, first of all, I do want to say that not everybody's sensitive to oxalates, but years ago when I was really, really working with kids with autism, and for some reason they were extremely sensitive to high oxalate foods. When they were tested by Great Plains labs, they were shown to have issues with oxalates big time, and always also with yeast. So I want to just say that people with yeast infections, which is the millions of people, they are going to be sensitive to oxalates as long as the yeast infection is active and out there and not under control, because the yeast are also making oxalates. So if you eat a food high in oxalates and the yeast are making oxalates, you're going to have a reaction. So it's really important to understand that, because there are lists. Susan Owens has a list. Sally K. Norton has a new book out on superfoods. That's not exactly the name, Sally K. Norton, but she has her list. They vary a little bit. And one thing about oxalates, they're going to be a little bit different. Like, for example, in New Zealand, pecans are very low, but maybe somewhere else, like Georgia, pecans might be higher. So, it's a really tricky topic. Seeds, flax seeds are low, chia seeds are super high. And yet I like to add some seeds, especially ground flax seeds, or not unground, but when they're ground, then they really become fiber, and we do need more fiber. So we do make those short chain fatty acids. Um, anyway, so I've been studying oxalates for a very long time, and I see how many people are now on them because almond milk is really popular. Beets are super high, and people were, when I first started, really into juicing, and juicing was beets and carrots, and they were so extremely, juices were very, very high in sugar. And I thought, wow, they don't have fiber. They're super high in sugar. They're very damaging to people. And people that would, eat them all the time, bragging because they thought they were having this great food, aged very quickly. Um, so, excuse me. So I think it's important to know if you're sensitive to oxalates. And one way you can test that is you can take a high oxalate food and then just by itself, and then eat it, not with anything else, just by itself, and then see if in a little while, even the next morning, you have a reaction. Like everybody, they cause pain. For me, if I have like I say, a Chinese herb and don't know if it's high in oxalates or not, my left eye starts getting very dry and achy. It's a very common symptom and very common among the autism community. And some of the children have scratched their eyes out because of so much pain. Almond flour, like you go down the aisle of the health food store, and every delicious cracker cookie box mix, all of them are made with almond flour. It seems really hard to find them, especially if they taste good, to not have almond flour. That was a big, big issue for these kids because they were having, their mother wanted to, still give them pancakes and breads and birthday cakes and things, but they were using almond flour. So they got into big, big trouble with that. Anyway, so I just want people to do become aware that oxalates are a problem for a large number of people. And when you make your smoothie, don't put in chia seeds, but look for the alternative. Flax seeds would be the alternative. So I love the concept of smoothies, but I think they need a lot of education around whether they are unique to you. I mean, are they the right smoothie for you? Now, another issue is histamine. Histamine is a huge problem besides oxalates, and FODMAPs. Like so many people have problems in the small intestine, and they get a lot of gas and bloating when they eat a lot of foods. So I wanted to bring up in the podcast today something that I tell people to get all the time, and it was so there's some apps that you can go to, and one is an app called FODMAPs. It's from Monash University down there by you.
Melbourne,
Tess,
Australia. Yes.
yes. Uh, so they came out years ago. Now everybody loves what they've done. They actually did research on all these different individual foods, and they said, do these cause gas and bloating because they have certain kinds of sugars in them, like lactose is a sugar in milk that will cause gas and bloating. So, even if you ferment your milk into yogurt, it still has some lactose in it. But, fructose, there's a handful, like six of them, I think, altogether. But what I like for people to do is spend the $9, almost $10, and download this Monash University app. And then you go there and you say, okay, let me check pomegranate. Let me check cranberry. Let me check, avocado. Well, avocado is a high histamine food. As wonderful as it is, you might be better off putting in a little bit of MCT oil to get some fats. So it's a real. I mean, I would say that the average person who wants to do smoothies should do smoothies, but you want to begin to educate yourself on what's the best recipe for you. So surprisingly, I don't know if you've ever heard of dragon fruit, but you can buy it over here frozen in these little individual packets. Coconut meat is from the young coconut, not from the mature coconut. It is also it's a low FODMAP. It doesn't cause gas and bloating, but I often make a smoothie with the dragon fruit, the coconut, the meat from the young coconut, and then I'll put in vegetables like cucumber or lettuce or a piece of, one nice piece of kale because I want to get that sulforaphane. I love your idea of using bok choy, baby bok choy, because it's actually real creamy and it's a net substitute for spinach, which is super high in oxalates.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
I'll
I
stop
think
talking for a little while.
no. I mean, I think, that's why we're talking about bio-individuality, right? Because
Mhm.
we could be talking about smoothies, we could be talking about soups, we could be talking about salads, we could be talking about pasta, we could be talking about anything. And that same principle would apply, which is that it's really important to know what is appropriate for you. And I think that it's just really important to be making data driven decisions about your health. And so that can only be done in consultation with your practitioner, right? So you've got to be having someone
Or
that can
I do
interpret the data, right?
Well, I do
Like,
think you can do your own testing. Like when I don't know, like let's say I want to take a blend of herbs for osteoporosis to have better bones. Well, I'll take a few of them, and then I wait and see if I have a reaction. And then one of those herbs, or maybe all of those herbs, don't work for me because I do have this oxalate issue. Um, anyway, a lot of people have gut problems, and I think it's totally changed how we react today. Like maybe another generation ago, people weren't so sensitive as they are today. They don't have to be such sleuths, food detectives as they have to be today. But I think you can, definitely, if you can find a good functional medicine practitioner, that's perfect because you need that support. I like the idea of working together with a team. They might know things that you don't even know that they'll bring up. But, ultimately, you should be able to tell if your body's reacting.
yeah, but
And
I going back to the FODMAPs thing, obviously, FODMAP that protocol was developed, at Monash University, as you said, in Melbourne, Australia. I know a lot of FODMAPs dietitians and practitioners,
mm,
and it's really interesting as more and more information comes out about FODMAPs. And these carbohydrates and the reactions that you can have. I do think that it's really important to be doing that elimination diet and that discovery process with
mm.
somebody that can help you interpret that data, like a FODMAPs practitioner, because we've got whole sectors of society now staying off all of those FODMAP foods all
Mm-hmm.
the time long term, and it's only like a whole elimination's only supposed to be done short term. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's 8 weeks or 10 weeks or something like that, but there's a very methodical way that you can go through the process of discovering which foods are problematic for you, and
Mm-hmm.
it's different for everybody, right? So, Donna, you and I were talking about this before. You were telling me about, nutrigenomics and genomic nutrition years ago, and it's so exciting, right, for people to really dive in deep about what's appropriate, what is appropriate for you. And so I think that these apps are so wonderful, like you're saying, as a first point of entry where you can really start to develop that anecdotal data on your own. But
Mm-hmm.
I just think, the magic happens when you combine that anecdotal data of the self-testing that you do, and then you have a great, functional medical practitioner who can then
Mm-hmm.
go, oh, okay, so when you eat this, you feel this way, and these very clear patterns start to develop when you keep a food diary and you do these tests right at home. And then you put the other piece in and you have these really informed conversations, and then that's when you can find solutions and you can
Mm-hmm.
really start to
Well,
eat
you know,
strategically.
I completely agree with you, Tess, because, like, for example, this really surprised me. Broccoli causes a lot of gas and bloating for people. I have this delicious soup with broccoli and fennel, by the way. And, it would cause gas and bloating. So, for a lot of people, and me too. So, anyway, but what I discovered as I began, learning FODMAPs better, it's the crowns that are fine. It's the stems of the broccoli that cause the gas and bloating. And you may not discover that. I didn't for a while, but a practitioner would know that. So they would say, oh, yeah, the
Right.
crowns are okay. Don't avoid the broccoli because it is a good source of sulforaphane. Don't put in the stems. That's a great example. But I also wanted to, because you mentioned the peels of oranges and lemons and limes and things. The peels are incredibly high in oxalates, but the lemon and lime juice is not. So they're a great thing to add. But sometimes like let's say I don't know if basil is high in oxalates or not, but let's pretend it is. Let's say put a little bit of basil in, and you're just putting a little bit in. Like the amount of oxalates you're adding matters a lot too, and that's true with FODMAP. Like one of the reasons I love this app is because you can pick the food, and then click on it. Like let's say you type in cranberries, and find out if they're raw, they're fine. If they're pomegranate is high, but okay, so you're gonna try to figure out what to put in your smoothie. But the thing is oh my gosh, I forgot my train of thought. Oh yeah, so you can click on it and it'll open up and it will tell you the reason it's a FODMAP is because it's high in fructose. Now, I did a great podcast with Tom O'Brien because I put out an article, a newsletter article, and in there I said, you might be reacting to wheat, which is a FODMAP, by the way, not because of the gluten in the wheat. It may be that you're reacting to it because it's a FODMAP and it's fructans, Fructans. That's what's causing you to have the gut reaction. So somebody told Tom I said that, put out that newsletter, and he called me. We're friends, so he said, "Hey, you're going to mislead people, and they're going to start eating gluten again." And so we did a podcast together, and we covered this a lot. Uh, it's really the bottom line is it takes a lot of education to learn all this. So yes, I would agree with you. Find a good practitioner, and the Monash University has practitioners that are trained. They have them listed there, right?
Yes, they do. And they're all over the world.
Yeah.
So there's tons of them in the United States. If you live in the United States, if you're in Canada, if you're in Australia, it doesn't matter where you are. And, people do telehealth, all over
Hmm.
the world anyway now.
Hmm.
But I do think that, going back to your a comment about the amounts of things, that's also really interesting, right? Where you may
Hmm.
be able to tolerate a small amount of something. You may be able to tolerate something in the cooked form or the raw form, and this is all the stuff that you can really get into when you're working with somebody who really, really knows about this stuff. I'm
Very
not
good
a fan
point.
of Dr. Google. I'm not a fan of Dr. Friend or Dr. Neighbor. And just because it worked for, so and so doesn't mean it's appropriate for you. Right. And I
Hmm.
think that it's just really interesting to see what happens when somebody's really helping interpret things for you. I mean, I think there's so much information, right? My friend calls it infobesity. We're all, just
It's very
digesting
appropriate.
so much information and so much content all the time. But if you don't actually know how to apply the information for your specific needs, then you
Hmm.
can't have a transformation, right? You can't actually affect long-term change and get real results that are appropriate for you. And I think, you're right. The education piece is so key because there's so many different factors that come into play with what is appropriate for us. So our genes, I know you're really big on this. Our genes, our age, our health status, our health goals, our activity levels, food intolerances, environment, stress, personality, all this sort of stuff really informs what we're able to do, and I think that knowing that and understanding that, and that's why I'm loving all these new studies coming out about the gut microbiome and really getting into the nutrigenomics piece of it, and our individual gut microbiome and what would be appropriate, and how our particular gut microbiome recognizes certain bacteria and other. It's just so fantastic, right? We're in the infancy of it, but it's really exciting. And I know that you're a very big part of that. So, the information piece, get the information, and make data driven decisions. I think that's just really, really key. It's certainly something that all of my dietitians on my team and all of our programs, that's the really core focus of the message of what we share, which is making data driven decisions, right? And getting the anecdotal data in consultation with the clinical data, and then making really informed decisions from there. But yeah, I mean, there's so many foods, you see these food lists, all over the internet, foods for this, foods for that. Well, that's only part of the story, as you've been saying, right? If those
Hmm.
foods are not appropriate for you and your body, then they're actually not going to have that effect. It's like I was saying with the nightshades. Bell pepper can be anti-inflammatory for somebody, but if you're intolerant to it, then it becomes a pro-inflammatory food, right?
Hmm.
Which causes stress on the body, which in turn, has wreaks havoc with all kinds of other things. So yeah, just being informed and figuring out what works for you is such a key piece of better
Well,
nutrition.
Tess, too, it takes time to learn it. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure every single practitioner will tell you that they never stop learning. They learned as much as they could, and they keep adding to that body of knowledge, so that's what makes them really good at what they do. You can't, as a beginner, expect to do that. But I will say one of the good things about this app that I like uh, is the Monash University app, because I'll tell you about another one in a second. But that Monash University app is a fantastic way to learn. Like, so I'll walk in the store and I'll say, wait, I forgot. Is papaya okay? And does it cause gas and bloating? Well, it doesn't. Surprise, surprise. That if it's just really hard to get it right. But I probably have bought 10 this year, and I threw every single one of them out. Even went back to Whole Foods where I got them and said, "Look, you need to find another source for your papaya because none of them are good when you open them up." So that's another thing, is getting stuff. But so that what the cool thing about the app is you can click on papaya and it'll tell you if it's a FODMAP or not. But you can click it again, and it drops a little drop down comes along, and it will tell you that a cup is a problem, but a half a cup isn't a problem. And then there's another app that I really love for people also to buy, and it's called Histamine Intolerances. So that's another thing to check out. If you are having histamine reactions, you might want to check on this app. Like strawberries are and raspberries are high in histamine, but not if you just have 6 strawberries. They're okay, but a whole box of them is going to be a reaction to cause a reaction too. So I do love the fact that we have these apps because they're educating us, and until we learn, we can check them, and they also explain why they're causing that problem. Is
Yeah,
it
there
really
this
potent, or is it the fructan, or is it because it's got lactose in it, or mannose or sorbitol or something? That's the ingredient that is causing the problem. But if you take a much smaller amount, like a third of a cup or 6 raspberries or something, then sorbitol isn't an issue anymore. So you really have to have something like this to check. I think
Yeah, I mean, I
I
think
use
it's
it.
great. They're great tools, and it's a great starting point for discoverability for sure. But, I think the next level of that is, then really applying a systemic approach to what's going on in your body and how your systems are all speaking to each other. I think that a lot of people, we talk about immune boosting, but I think it's more appropriate to think about immune balancing and
Mm-hmm.
how are you balancing the different systems in your body, whether it's your immune system, your endocrine system, your digestive system, your gut microbiome, and things like that. Like, why are you intolerant to these certain foods, right? And so I
Mm-hmm.
think
Good
when
point.
people start really addressing this in a systemic way with qualified practitioners, that's when you get to the juice. That's when you get to the magic, right? Because cutting out certain foods is a strategy, but it's only one strategy. And so when you start to figure out how you can balance your immunity, like it's alarming to me how many people don't know that they have a thyroid imbalance. Right. And there's all kinds of issues with the thyroid, right? Which, is part of your endocrine system, right? Which affects, your hormone function and all of these things, which is inextricably connected to your gut microbiome, right? And this gut brain connection and the enteric nervous system and stuff like that, right? So when you like, so why I keep going back to working with a good practitioner who understands and has spent a lifetime educating themselves about this and continuing to learn, staying up with the latest research. To your point, Donna, I think that's when you can really start to dial in your nutrition in a much more nuanced way. So I love those apps you're talking about. I know about them, I've used them, they're amazing. But I just want to make sure that we're also sharing with people that it's one strategy. So you just definitely want to make sure that you're having your blood work done at least once a year. I'm going to say twice, but having your annual checkup with your doctor. And some people are seeing their doctor more than once a year because you may have a specialist, you may have all these other things you need to be doing, checking in on your tests. But I think that the knowledge, to your point, Donna, is the power, right? Having this knowledge about your body, what's going on, taking these tests at home, trying different foods, eating it, collecting the data, discussing it with your practitioner, having your tests, all of these different things, right, will help you get to solutions to understand how to fuel your body efficiently so that it runs better, right? Because life is just more fun when you're strong and healthy and vibrant and your systems are firing the way that they're supposed to.
And you're aging more slowly, which is very, very important. And it seems to be a very hot topic, even among young people, which I love seeing that. So, what you're talking about, I hope everybody really got what Tess is saying, that what we're talking about is, so if you go have an issue with oxalates, if you have an issue with histamine, for example, find out why. Like histamine, there's something going on in the gut. I have had so many people, even friends, say, "Oh, I have mast cell, dysbiosis, or I can't eat all these foods that are high in histamine." But then I say, "But okay, what's going on in your gut? Let's fix the gut and see if we can't get you where you're not so sensitive to histamine foods, and then slowly introduce them, find the ones that are okay." Because, like, take cauliflower, it is a FODMAP, but you might be fine with cauliflower. So that again is why you have to, do some testing on your own. But what you're really saying is, so look underneath that symptom, this reaction to all these foods, to the real issue, which is most likely a gut issue. And you want to fix the gut. And I think that is really where working with the practitioner is very important.
Yes, exactly. I completely agree. If your gut is in trouble, the rest of your health is in trouble. And you have been teaching this for decades, Donna, and
three,
you know
three
that old
decades.
adage of you are what you eat, it's not actually accurate. You're technically what you digest and absorb. So often it's an absorbability issue. and so we don't, the villi in the small intestine just doesn't get enough press, if you ask me, because those are those little hairs in the small intestine that grab onto the good stuff, filter things out, and so much of the absorption takes place in that small intestine, right? And we only think of the large intestine as a place where we excrete waste. Well, it
Mm-hmm.
also is a place where digestion takes place as well, right? And so in particular, when we're talking about short chain fatty acids, postbiotics, we've been talking about the the butyrate and things like that, right? Which in turn helps with the insulin and the GLP-1 and all that kind of thing, right? So for those of you going through menopause, this becomes even more important in terms of providing relief for those kinds of symptoms, right? And going back to cruciferous vegetables, you've been talking about cauliflower and broccoli and FODMAPs and things like that. There's all kinds of reasons why cruciferous vegetables like Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, broccoli, kale, things like that could be problematic,
Cabbage. Yep.
right?
There's
Cabbage,
so many
right?
of them. Arugula, which we'll call rocket down there. I was surprised to learn that's a cruciferous vegetable. I just thought it
Right.
was like lettuce or something
Yeah,
originally a long time
and
ago.
I mean, they're in these cross categories, right? We think of those things
Mm-hmm.
as leafy greens and things, but they're also in the cruciferous vegetable family, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that we see examples of this all the time, and I'm sure you do in the body ecology community, where when you clean up your gut health and digestion, you balance your gut microbiome, your absorption is better, you're taking in more fiber, you're figuring out which foods work for you and which foods are problematic for you, to your point about the histamine intolerances, that kind of oxalates, whatever, FODMAPs, whatever it might be. That's where this data makes all the difference, right? Where you can start to really understand, at the moment, and I think the at the moment piece, at present is really key, because this is what we discover working with people with, FODMAPs, is that they may be sensitive temporarily, but when they clean up their systems, their gut health, they balance their immune function, their endocrine function, and their thyroid is working the way it's supposed to, things like that, then potentially foods that were causing problems a year ago aren't anymore. Or said differently, you can tolerate them in small amounts, like you were talking about, Donna. So
Mm-hmm.
again, it is just about that experimenting, that trying, but I don't think that you can fly blind, and I don't think that it's a prudent choice to completely do it on your own. I think that you can collect that anecdotal data, but then I think
Mm-hmm.
that you need help interpreting it and forming like a really clear path for
Mm-hmm.
what should be done. Because like to your point, Donna, this is why I love registered dietitians, and I think that there's, I love other specialists too, don't get me wrong, but they eat, sleep, and breathe how to use food as a tool for functional, for health, right? As a functional tool for health. And I think that, there are dietitians that specialize in certain health issues, right? And they work in consultation with surgeons, with, endocrinologists or cardiologists or whatever it might be, right? And I think that there's a lot of misconception about the differences between health coaches, dietitians, and nutritionists, right? So dietitians are people with medical licenses, right? They work in hospitals. They have to continually update their credentials. And so, for example, if you have an oncology issue, if you have some kind of a cancer, you would want to find a food practitioner and practitioners who specialize in your specific kind of cancer. If it was breast cancer or colon cancer or pancreatic cancer. Likewise, if you had, FODMAPs, you determined that that was your specific issue right now, you'd want to go to someone who had just been diving into that, right? Just like, a lot of you have come to Body Ecology because Donna has spent decades and a lifetime studying candida, and autoimmune conditions and the gut microbiome and stuff like that, right? So again, it is about, there's so much noise out there, particularly on the internet.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of clickbait, right? A lot of headlines that might look really great and they're promising these quick wins and solutions. You get into the article and it's just all search engine optimization, right? I think it's about, considering the source of your information, so obviously Body Ecology gives really credible information. You have great guests on this podcast, but really thinking about where the information is coming from and making sure you're getting, science-based, credible information. I think that's another piece of it. I find I come to some articles and I just go, oh gosh, just like you were talking about, let's get on a podcast because we don't want to mislead people about wheat, right? You were wanting to make sure that you were getting the information out there that was correct, right? For people
Well,
that are
Tom did, especially because he's
right.
been
Yeah.
decades telling people don't eat gluten. Here's the problem. And
Right.
I come along and maybe, I'm not sure, I'd have to reread the article. Maybe it sounded like I was saying, I thought I made that point really clear. I wasn't saying eating wheat, but there was this other thing in wheat that we
Right.
should look at, and it could be a problem. And if you're, reacting to FODMAPs, it could be an issue. Um,
I mean,
it
I'm
was,
gluten free. I have been for decades, and I'll never look back. I mean, it is such a huge protein, and we have,
mhm.
mesh of our intestinal wall has to just stretch to let it in, right? So no, I'm totally on board with you about the gluten piece of it. But
Well,
yeah,
Tom, too. I mean, Body Ecology has been gluten-free, casein-free since the very
yeah,
beginning. I was going to say, so at this point, I have a feeling that, I hope not, but I have a feeling that people are listening thinking, oh my God, this is so confusing. She's talking about FODMAP, she's talking about histamine, and Tess is coming in and telling all this other stuff, and I got to work with a practitioner. And I'm sure people right now are confused, but I do want to say that body ecology is based on 7 principles. One of them is the principle of uniqueness, as I mentioned, but another one is the principle of step by step. So, in the universe that we live in, the universe advances in teeny tiny little increments so that morning comes and then throughout the day, without us really noticing, teeny tiny little increments, it becomes dark and then back to light again. But the universe happens that way, and so same with us. In learning something, you want to, uh, like you can't do it all right away. You want to take little bitty steps at a time, learn a few things, get comfortable with that, and then add a few more things to what you're doing, so you don't feel overwhelmed. So please don't feel overwhelmed if you're listening to Tess and I, and
no,
it
that
seems
is
like too much information.
it's a really good point, Donna. I think that we're all just aiming to make the next better choice, right?
Wait, say that again, or I'll just
We're all just
aiming
aiming
to.
to make the next better choice. And I think
Mm,
that it is about that step by step, approach of just wanting to be better. So in our
mhm,
community, we like to say good, better, or best, not perfect, because perfection
good.
doesn't exist, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it
yeah.
is
Not.
just about that step by step, learning something, putting something in place, collecting the data, noticing what's going on, right? So, this term mindful eating has unfortunately become synonymous with I only eat healthy. I'm a healthy eater. I do everything perfectly all the time. Well, that's just not realistic and ridiculous. And so, I prefer a much more gentle approach, which is just paying attention to the eating experience without judgment. And I think the
Mm,
without judgment piece is so key. So I think that, really at the end of the day, if we want to pare it down to one sentence, what we've been talking about today, it is that gentle noticing. What foods make me feel good and what foods don't. And I think at the end of the day, that's the message of this conversation, right? Is just
mhm,
gently noticing, when I eat broccoli, I feel like this. I wonder why that is. Okay, let me note that down. Oh, when I
mhm.
feel blah, 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 I also feel gassy and bloated or whatever it might be. So I think that if it was one tangible takeaway from this conversation, to your point, it would be to just be gently noticing which foods make you feel good and which foods don't.
And you are a experiment of one, and nobody, your sister might be able to eat broccoli or ice cream or something, and it doesn't work for you. So another thing, I'm kind of, if people are wondering, like, okay, I've got this journey that you want to go on, I want to get well, I have all these health problems, so where do I start? So I also like to tell people that there's 4 things you want to be focused on in the beginning as you take your first step. Again, you can't do them all at once, but if you could keep in mind that we have to create energy, because if you don't have any energy, you're not going to, nothing heals, nothing gets better. You can't digest or anything. Hormones can't be made. You don't sleep very well. Energy is essential. So you want to do, really look at Does this food give me energy? Do I have good lifestyle habits where, I'm looking into the computer and checking my emails and texts and everything at midnight? So I'm watching scary high stress, this maybe raising your cortisol. That whatever you're doing to keep you from having the energy you need, you have to really focus on that. And then correct digestion is another one of those four things. Conquer infections and bring that inflammation down. Because when you say you're trying to create balance in your immune system, you just don't want this runaway immune system that's got too much inflammation because you have infections like viruses or yeast, or because you have gut issues. That's another reason why we'll have a lot of infections, a lot of inflammation. And then the fourth thing is to cleanse, to detoxify, get the toxins out. So if you're working on creating energy, correcting digestion, bringing those infections, therefore the inflammation down, and then fourth, detoxifying, which the body just kind of does that anyway. And then, of course, as you do all those things, you get more energy. So they're all intertwined, actually. But again, I do try to make it more simple, because I know that we were both presenting a lot of information to people. Um, anyway, so there was one thing I wanted to actually bring up if we had time. Do we have a few more minutes? And that
We
was,
do. I just want to quickly add something to what you were saying though, because
okay.
what to achieve those four things that Donna was talking about, it's about eating plant foods, right? That are
Mm-hmm,
appropriate for you.
mm-hmm,
And so it doesn't matter what your dietary stripes are, whether you're that being plant, everybody's diet should be plant based. And plant based, again, has become synonymous with veganism or being vegetarian. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just saying everybody's diet should be based in plants, and then you supplement your intake of quality plant foods, fruits and vegetables, nuts, seeds, whatever it might be, with whatever other high quality foods you want to. If you want to do high quality animal protein, if you're a vegan, if you're a vegetarian, whatever it is. But I do like the 80-20 rule. And I know that you talk
yeah,
about this a lot in body ecology. And I think
yes,
if you want talking about simplifying the message, I think at the end of the day, that 80-20 rule is simplifying those four things you were talking about, right? Which is
yeah.
80% of your plate, non-starchy vegetables that are appropriate for you, and then 20% of other quality foods, right? It's just looking at the composition of your meals and snacks, right? And, eating the rainbow, right? Because they've all got different phytonutrients, right? And different antioxidants and all these different things, right? So getting in that variety. But again, considering what we've been talking about, right? Just noticing
Mm-hmm.
which things work and which things don't.
Well,
All right.
you reminded me of something now. I
Yeah.
can talk about this forever. First of all, one of the mistakes that myths out there is that, uh, if you have a high histamine reaction to foods, don't eat fermented foods. Well, first of all, they're not all the same. There's a big difference between uh, a fermented beer and a wine and kombucha. And what I teach people to do for years is to use a starter. Why? Because the starter's got plantarum in them, Lactobacillus plantarum, and I have so much research on how plantarum degrades histamine and all the other biogenic amines like putrescine and tyramine and all. So anyway, I never have an issue with the fermented vegetables the way I like to make them, with a starter just added. So we even have a starter. Anyway, so there's a lot of myths out there. And so you do want to go to people that are maybe specialized in that particular element. Like I've been, teaching about fermented foods for 30 years, because when I discovered that there's this world in our gut, which I didn't know the word microbiome yet, but it was called I called it the inner ecosystem. And I thought, okay, so how does it get there? So then I start, looking, and discovered that, well, it comes in to our body when we're born, if we're lucky. But then what about, we aren't born except one time. So now what? And that's when I realized that the foods we eat are critical for establishing that inner ecosystem and maintaining it. Ferment, Fermented vegetables are the best. They're the top of all the best, all the ones out there. I would put fermented vegetables. So even if I'm in a lot of really in a hurry, I'll have a small piece of, say, fish. I mean, I digest fish best of all. I'm a blood type A. They thrive on fish. And then I'll just have a scoop or two of fermented vegetables, which mine usually have for like carrot. Well, usually my favorite batch is um, cabbage, carrots, garlic, and ginger. So I'm actually getting four vegetables that are now much more bioavailable, the nutrients in them, and so it's like eating more of them in just a spoonful or two. But I'm adding bacteria. It's a digestive aid, and I didn't have time maybe to make greens like I love to have. I love it. Everybody had some greens every day. But some people with gut issues, they can't do raw foods, so they do need to do cooked food. So that's another individual thing. But anyway, so we're still stuck on this subject of
No, but I
how,
mean,
how
fermented
principle
vegetables,
of uniqueness.
they're so delicious. I mean, I eat, fermented sauerkraut or kimchi or fermented pickles or whatever, probably 3 or 4 times a day. And I make my
Wow,
own
good for you.
all kinds of
Well,
stuff
I
that I
hope people
miss.
realize, like they watch you age. Tess, you've never aged. Now, as long as I've known you, you look exactly the same as you did
Oh,
15 years ago.
you're very sweet. I turned 50 this year. But it's interesting, the aging process and the quality
Mm-hmm.
of your skin, because we
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
typically people only think of the skin as this beautifying thing, and I can put things on. Well, the skin is our, the largest organ in our body, right? It's the frontline defense in our immune responses, and boy, does it tell a story about what is going on inside, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
fermented foods and this probiotic thing and making sure this gut microbiome, boy, does that have an effect on your aging, your skin, just like you were talking about. And Donna, you were the one that put me on to making coconut water kefir. I make batches of
Yeah, I
coconut
invented that.
water
Yeah.
every week
Uh,
of my life,
and
and
it is
changed my life.
fantastic for your skin.
Yeah,
It's
fantastic for your skin. Thank you.
yeah,
And so
and
when I
it's very cleansing. You
yes,
like people would tell me after I invented it and they started doing it, it kind of spread like wildfire, and I got feedback, and they would say, "Oh, I don't have my skin so clear, and my period is really clean when I menstruate." And then also people with joint problems said, I don't have any knee problems. I'll be 80 in 3 years. And that's such a, like, I think 80 years old, that is such a old number. But I don't have any wrinkles either. And honestly, I don't think about it very much. Too busy to think about it. But, I think, what is it that I'm doing that I don't have wrinkles? And it really does boil down to, I think, the top of the list is the right fermented foods. I guess. I mean, I don't know. But,
I mean,
like
look,
you said,
it's so powerful. It's so powerful. But one thing I do want to say, because fermentation has trended so heavily, and this gut microbiome conversation is, more out there in the mainstream, the sort of the last
mhm,
5 to 10 years, there's a little bit of misconception about it, right? So, for example, in the United States, you will have so-called sauerkraut or pickles in the refrigerated section in the grocery store, at Whole Foods, at a co-op, but they actually aren't truly fermented. So because
mhm,
they put them near the hot dogs and the hamburgers and the deli meats and the cheeses and things like that, so you just want to make sure that if you turn it over and the minute you see vinegar and sugar and things like that,
mhm,
it's not truly
mhm.
fermented. So you actually want sauerkraut, pickles, kimchi that's actually truly fermented, like what Donna is talking about, that so it
Yeah.
contains all of those beneficial probiotics, right?
Yeah. And you know what? Today, like years ago, if you wanted those, you had to make them. Today, you can't. Like you go in the health food stores, there's 5 or 6 companies making them.
Great. And they sell it
So
at Costco. I
I
mean, you
think
can get
you
it
I
so many
didn't know
different
that.
places. Yeah, I mean, they have such great options. And if you are someone that loves to go to the farmer's market like I do, you can support a local small business that's making their
Hmm.
particular brand of it.
Hmm.
And it's really interesting because in the beginning, you're like, oh, I can't do that. That takes forever. It's actually really, really easy. So
Hmm.
I think the messiest bit is chopping up all the vegetables, right? But you can use your food processor for that, right?
Hmm.
So just
Hmm.
don't be afraid of giving it a go. And I think the most fun way to do it is do it with a bunch of friends. I always
Did
think
you say
food
that again? Is the
do
deal
it with
what?
a bunch of friends. So some,
Oh,
you
we'll
can
have a party Sunday afternoon.
have like a
Yeah,
sauerkraut
because you
party, right? And
yeah,
everybody,
because you end up with like 9 jars. Everybody can walk out
yes,
with 2 or 3 apiece, and it
yes.
is fun.
And making it fun and putting on some music and making a sort of a day of it. So that's often
Hmm.
what I will do. I'll invite a couple of friends over, we'll just spend time together, we'll talk about what's going on, we'll all make it, and everybody walks away with a couple of jars. I think that's the most fun way to do it.
Hmm. Yeah, you reminded me years ago. and there was a raw food center in Santa Monica, and that's exactly what we did. And we just advertised that we're going to make, kind of have a party, get together. We had about 6 tables with, 6 or 8 people around each table with a food processor at the end, and everybody walked out with whatever they had made. But everybody had to bring in like cabbage, or so that, and some people they might have brought in carrots or something. But anyway, we didn't spend money on cabbage and carrots and stuff like all the food, but they did the work, and we charged for the class. And it was so popular. It was extremely noisy, however. But I found NutriBullet has a veggie bullet, and that's cool because you put the piece of, say, piece of carrot, your carrot, or let's say a piece of cabbage, into the chute on the top, and then it shoots it out on the side. Like there's a chute. I'm using probably the wrong terms here, but out it comes on the side, and you catch it in a bowl. I wish more companies would do that. But have you ever tried to take KitchenAid? Because they have a veggie grinder, um, that shreds.
Yes.
It's an attachment. Have you ever tried that? Because when you've got a device like that where you can just go through 3 or 4 heads of cabbage in less than 10 minutes, that's a huge time saver. And that's what this KitchenAid, this veggie bullet. Anyway, they're real hard to get now. I think the last one I had somebody get was on Amazon, but they seem to be disappearing. They probably weren't very popular, but somebody needs to be thinking that way.
Yeah, I mean there are lots of obviously, when I was the global spokesperson for KitchenAid blenders, so I'm very, very aware of all of the KitchenAid
That's why
countertop.
I'm asking you. I
Yeah,
thought
no,
you
no, no,
would probably
great, great. So
know
they
the answer.
have some really great KitchenAid stand mixer attachments. If you have a KitchenAid stand mixer, they
Mm-hmm.
have
You have to have
a
that.
grinder, they have a food chopper, they have, and then in their food processor, they have these amazing discs. So it's a shredding disc, there's a coarse, there's a fine, there's a dicer,
Mm-hmm.
and there's other brands that have these too, right? So Breville has the sous chef food processor is seriously, I think, the best food processor in the world. So obviously, I'm very, I've studied a lot of appliances. I used to work as a consultant with companies, so I have tried a lot of different countertop appliances. There's also very inexpensive little mini food choppers that are actually really good. So you can actually do it in small little batches if you're in a small space, if you're living alone, you don't want to make huge batches, you don't want to have huge appliances everywhere, you don't want to buy yet another thing, and some of these things are, $30 or $40, right? So KitchenAid's got a
Exactly.
tiny little mini food chopper that's amazing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there's other companies that make those little choppers. So yeah, just work smarter, not harder. Make it easy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm not a fan though. I mean, this is great for convenience, but and Donna, maybe you would agree with me, but in terms of the nutrition quality, I'm not a fan of buying pre-chopped stuff at the grocery store because
Oh
we know
no.
the minute we slice things, the oxidation and
Yes.
the degradation of nutrients begins, right? So
Yes, exactly.
you want to
100% agree
control.
there.
You're
Mm-hmm.
doing it at home, you're chopping, and just use those appliances. I am
Mm-hmm.
such a kitchen appliance zealot, because it just makes food prep so much easier, right? And you know what? If
Mm-hmm.
you're someone that goes, I'm on a budget, I can't buy those appliances. Well, maybe ask a friend or a family member, do you mind coming over, or can I just borrow that for the day so I can make my sauerkraut? And like
Because they're
Donna
probably
said,
not using it. Probably
yeah,
many people
right.
have the bigger size one, and it's just stuck somewhere in a cabinet and they're not using it anymore.
So true. And you can pick things up at a steal, a bargain on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist
Oh,
or at a
really?
garage sale. I got a juicer for $20 at a garage sale because someone said, "Oh, my father gave that to me. I don't know what to do with it." And it was a
Mm-hmm.
$300 juicer that had never been
Mm-hmm.
used. So every once in a while, you can pick up these bargains, where you just keep an eye on stuff, right? But I think asking friends and family members is a great option if
Yeah.
you're on a budget.
Actually, you reminded me. My sister has a house down in Florida, and that we go to. It's not her main home, but way back, tucked in a cabinet, is a KitchenAid. A big one. And I look at that thing and I think, I got to get it home somehow. And all I have to do is buy the attachment because she never uses it. She bought it because somebody came for Christmas to make some stuff and asked her to buy one, and she could afford it. And So anyway, after that one meal, it never has been used. So you just reminded me of that. But I've thought so many times, it's just that it isn't something put in an airplane and is heavy. And I don't want to
Yeah,
drive down
but
there. But
those
anyway,
things last
but
for.
anyway, it would be free. I should just ship it. But
Oh,
I'd
you
like to have to.
should.
She would just give it to me to get the space in her cabinet. Anyway, I was going to ask you about hydration. Do we have time for that? Because, you
Oh,
know,
let's talk about that. That's a big one.
well, we may not have time to go into it. We can always do another one. But what I'm thinking is that, all these people that do react to histamine foods. Years ago, there was a book out called Your Body's Many Cries for Water. Now, I
Mm-hmm.
can never pronounce the author's name. It was like really hard for me to pronounce it, but I remember it. But he was in a concentration camp, and people weren't getting any food, and they were very sick. And he just had them drinking a lot of water, and they survived. But I do remember in that book, and just a little bit of that book, he happens to mention that when you're dehydrated, you are going to have histamine reactions. And sometimes I'll have such a busy day, I'll just drink a little bit of water, like maybe start off okay, but then don't drink any. Now I'm dehydrated. And so it'll be nighttime, and I start wanting to itch. And I think, well, it's not that I ate something wrong. It's that I'm dehydrated, and I'll go just drink a bunch of water. With a little bit of salt or electrolytes in it, and then this reaction goes away. So I want to share that because I'm sure most people don't think about that. I never hear about that from experts in histamine. But could you talk about electrolytes and dehydration and just a few minutes on that?
Yeah, I really love talking about this because it sounds like a no-brainer, right? Because we're all taught drink fluids, liquids. But most people are dehydrated. And, we
Mm.
need our body's mostly water, and all of our bodily fluids are saline, right? You talked about adding salt and electrolyte. Sodium is an electrolyte, it's a mineral electrolyte, right? So, yes, we need to stay hydrated because going back to the digestion piece, we need to liquefy all our food in order for us to be able to digest and absorb it. So, there's that piece. You talked about energy during our conversation, right? So, we need fluids and we need water to provide energy, right? To provide that energy throughout our body. We know that carbohydrates is the body's preferred source of energy, but we need protein, healthy fats, all this sort of stuff, right? But what's interesting about the hydration piece is just first of all, just noticing, is your skin dry and itchy? Are your lips cracked? Are you feeling fatigued? All these sorts of things, right? You're already dehydrated at that point, potentially,
Yeah,
right?
cracked, dry, cracked lips, even if they're just
Right,
getting a little deep dry,
right,
that's the colon. In
right,
Chinese medicine, the lower lip is the colon
right,
and the upper lip is the stomach. So
right,
I would know if my lips were getting dry that I need to start drinking something.
right.
But what would you recommend? You wouldn't just plain old water or
Yes, so I think that there's three things about hydration. So the first thing is we hydrate with water and water-based beverages. So maybe herbal teas is something I really really love. I talked about the kraut juice, the kimchi key juice, the coconut water kefir, the beet kvass, things like that. So that's the first piece of it. But the other big piece about drinking is our body can only absorb so much water at a time, so much water per hour. So you want to be spacing your intake of fluids throughout the day. So what we see a lot of people doing in our 60-day reset and other programs is that they will not drink water the whole day and then chug like 4 or 5 glasses of water. Well, you're not actually going to absorb and utilize all of that water. So that's one thing. The second thing is I like, eating a little bit of raw foods with every meal, and I should say, and making one meal a day a raw meal, because raw fruits and vegetables, a lot of them are over 90% mineral rich water, right? So you're talking about your lettuces, your cucumber, your celery, all these sorts of things, right? So not only there's whole studies done about this where your body's actually able to absorb the water from raw foods faster than a glass of water, right? Or more efficiently or effectively, right? So don't discount the importance of raw foods. And then of course you're getting those enzymes, right? Because when we cook foods, we're ostensibly dehydrating them to varying degrees, right? And we're destroying the enzymes that aid in their digestion. So that's the other piece. So
but let's see.
water-based
I want to add
and
this
your
though.
raw foods.
Yeah,
The
a lot
other,
of people can't digest raw though, which is
right,
again why a
the fermented
blender
food. Yeah,
and a blender, and
right.
yeah. Yeah, for
Right.
sure. Fermented foods are
Totally. So these
good for that.
fermented foods that are raw, but they're
Hmm.
pre-digested, so they're
Yeah,
much more easy to digest. So
the
and
microbes have done the work for you.
right.
So
And
yeah,
to
but
your point
again,
about adding the body ecology starter to make your sauerkraut, if you do have a histamine intolerance, then that would make that more of a viable option for you.
mhm. Oh,
The
also, I had this tested at the University of Nebraska, but I made 3 jars with no starter, and then 3 jars with starter, and I sent them over there to them, and they came back. The count of all bacteria, like not just more plantarum, but all of them were just millions of times higher. And so it was so interesting because I started thinking about it. Well, yes, it had more lactobacillus, but it had more everything. And so, some of the microbes are leaders and other microbes follow them. And Dr. Leo Gallen actually coined the term Alexander organisms, meaning that, like, Alexander the Great was a leader that people just followed him because he was Alexander the Great. And that's how certain bacteria, Lactobacillus plantarum is one of them, all the rest of them grow more and just behave better, incorporate with each other more. Because you've got these leaders in there. Akkermansia is another one. Johnsonia, he told me, was another one, which is, you can't
yeah,
buy that one, but still they just are in these fermented foods. So
yeah, the
yeah, they grew in great
acromancy
number.
conversation is fascinating, right? That's why I love what Colleen Cutcliffe and her team are doing over at Pendulum Probiotics. They
Hmm.
have figured out how to grow acromancia, right? Because it has to grow in an oxygen-free environment, like in the lining of our gut, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
yeah, I mean that's a whole other conversation, right? But about hydration, I think that what's interesting about the hydration conversation is that you can be drinking all of the water and the water based beverages and all of the raw foods, but if the water isn't going into your cells where it's needed, you can still be dehydrated. So this idea of true cellular hydration is a really big thing, and we're all taught to watch our sodium intake, but I don't think potassium gets enough press, gets enough airplay, right? And so sodium and potassium, they're both mineral electrolytes, and they
Hmm.
work in consort with each other to regulate fluid balance in the body. So sodium keeps water out of the cells and potassium escorts it into the cells, right? So you've got to balance your sodium and your potassium. Going back to what Donna was saying before with those 4 points, and we were talking about the non-starchy vegetables, the plant foods, they're loaded with potassium, a lot of these foods, right? So going back to our coconut water is loaded with potassium. Carrot juice, if you can tolerate that, is loaded with potassium. You've got your leafy greens, if you can tolerate those. You've got your cruciferous vegetables. You've got lots of avocado, if you can tolerate that. They are loaded with potassium, right? So that's why we go back to that 80-20 thing we were talking about, right? Making sure that your plate, your meals, your snacks have some plant food, some non-starchy vegetables, whatever it is that you have figured out you can tolerate. That's what should be happening. So this sodium potassium balance, it is a game changer in terms of hydration, right?
Hmm.
So yeah,
Hmm.
this hydration piece and in terms of digestion, but everything, right? But going back to our skin conversation, right? Glowing skin, flushing out those toxins, like Donna was talking about, that detoxification piece, making sure that we're helping our liver offload toxins while we're sleeping and resting, is just so, so key for better health.
And if you buy a potassium supplement, it's way. It's just not enough potassium. Like it's, I think 99 milligrams in a little capsule. You would want to have at least 200. So you're definitely better off getting it from plants. I just remember how we met, Tess, our mutual friend, Selena DeLongra, who is with Selena naturally, but she's really the brain and the hard work behind Celtic sea salt. So that's what I cook with all the time and
Me
use that.
too. Me too.
So
And that's exactly how we met in person.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
we
the
met
Trench Expo or
Selena's.
something. We had dinner. Selena had us right
We
for dinner.
did. We did. She's amazing. Yeah, she's so amazing. And that salt is amazing because it
And you know
retains.
what? She has other salts too. One is even higher in potassium than it is in sodium. And then there's a salt I love that comes from Hawaii called makai. All these
Yeah.
salts have a different flavor to them, and this particular salt is so clean. It comes from thousands of feet below the ocean floor, and I don't know how they get it up, but I love that salt. It is crystally, it's not fine. She has
Yes.
fine grind Celtic salt, and then the little crystals of salt. And Makai is a crystal salt, so you need a grinder to
But the
use it. But it's
crystals
great.
retain more of the brine. They contain more of the minerals, right? And retain more of
Oh, I
them,
didn't know
right?
that. That's interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I learned this from Selena. I have to, so shout out to Selena, right? And they sent me very, very detailed third party testing of
Oh
salts, and
yeah.
it a fascinating conversation. But I mean, to me, I've always got a whole bunch of salts in my house. I think salts are like fine wines, I don't
Me too.
very much
And olive oils, different
olive
things.
oils. I
Yeah.
mean, I have all different kinds of oil, and it's just they're so different in flavor. To your point, and it's
Mm-hmm.
when you're really taking in that high quality salt. And I do, to your point about salt, the quality of the salt you're using really does matter, right? So this
Well,
processed
because
one
everybody,
hurts you so.
everywhere, people say, "Oh, pink salt,"
Mm.
and the thing is that that salt, the Himalayan salt, doesn't really come from the Himalayas. It's really from Pakistan, and over there, and Selena taught me this too, because they
Same.
produce. Yeah, people said that. Well, it's from the ocean, the Celtic salt, so it's dirty because the ocean's polluted. They constantly screen, and it's not dirty, but also this pink salt. So the Pakistani salt that they don't regulate these salt mines. Everybody's selling it because it got real popular. So she has every single salt she has. You can be sure is excellent quality, and so she has a pink Himalayan salt also if you want that. But it's cool, like you said. I have probably at least five of her different salts, and I just intuitively reach for one when I'm in the mood. But the Hawaiian salt, the Makai salt, I do put it in a little shaker, a little grinder thing, and put it on my food because it really has a flavor you can taste. Salt we get in processed foods is the dangerous salt. They keep hearing, "Don't eat this salt. You have these genes that are not high blood pressure and so on." It's that salt, not this kind of salt that we're talking about. That's the problem that would raise blood sugar. So I just want to make that clear too. Somewhere back in my older podcast, I have a podcast with Selena, so I encourage people to go back and look at that.
Yeah,
But
she's
Tess,
fantastic. She's
yeah,
fantastic. But again, about the sodium piece, again, it's about knowing what's appropriate for you. So just coming back to this idea of bio-individuality, what
mhm.
are the appropriate levels? Yes, we get general nutrition guidelines from, the FDA, we get them from the USDA, we get them from the World Health Organization, blah, blah, blah. But they're general guidelines, right? So going back to this bio-individuality and knowing what's appropriate for you. So for example, if you have a specific health condition, like you have migraines, or you have a kidney condition or something like that, your sodium levels, for example, and certain other things will be a little bit different than somebody that doesn't have those conditions. For example, it's just one example, but this is why this bio-individual component is so important.
Well, we should probably stop there because the two of us could go on forever. Maybe I'll put this out in part one and part two. But I hope people listening to this have picked up a lot of points. Too many probably to remember, so listen to this more than one time, please. Share it if it's helped you and you think it'll help other people. I'm sure it will. And also, Tess, how do people find you? Let's say they want recipes, they want to take some of the courses and everything. Tell everybody how to get to you over there in Australia.
Yeah, so I mean, still split my time between Melbourne and LA. So I'm half American, half Australian. So, but you can find me at theblendergirl.com. We have a really active Facebook page where I share lots of recipes every day. But there's all the recipes are gluten free and vegan. Don't have any refined sugars. There's a body ecology section of the website where if you're looking for body ecology friendly friendly recipes, there's tons of great recipes there. If you are interested in really diving deep into this bio-individuality component and really figuring out what works for you, we lead our 60-day reset, my team of dietitians and I, 4 times a year. So you can learn more about that at skinny60.com.
Just say
Um,
that again. At what?
at skinny60. So SKINNY 60 S60.com.
60. Okay.
And skinny is not about an obsession with weight. So it's all about getting the information, the skinny on what works for you. That's what that
Ah,
means.
I
Because
didn't know
skinny
that.
is a very repelling word for me. And I think we need to redefine what that means. Weight is only one measure of better health, it's only one marker of better health, right? So we're
Yeah.
looking at your gut health, it's a digestive reset, right? So I know a lot of people in the body ecology community have done our program. It's body ecology friendly. I use a lot of the same principles. Um, and so but the big key thing is this bio-individual component, right? Is I have a team of dietitians who lead the program with me, and our lead dietitian at the moment specializes in FODMAPs and histamines and food intolerances and oxalates, a lot of the stuff that Donna was talking about on this podcast, right? So it's
Perfect.
really important that the program happens live because we want to get to know you. We want to give you the information, but we want to help you apply it for your specific situation. And I think that's the difference with that program. So you can learn more, all about that at my websites. I've also got another website, thedecadentdetox.com. And so we have a 14-day cleanse, a 7-day program. If you want to do some juicing, but you want to do it the responsible way, you want to learn about making savory smoothies and juices and some of the things we've been talking about, there's also that community as well. There's a lot of crossover between the communities. People sort of, come around and do quite a few different things. But yeah, I do a lot of Facebook Lives too. If you just want to come and sort of hear, more about, I'll sort of drop a few little nutrition, hints and tips, a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about. But I think that, going to your point, Donna, if you're feeling overwhelmed listening to this, it does help to have recipes that help you put some of these things into practice, right? And really
Mhm.
easy things. And that's, I think, what I do on my Facebook Lives quite a bit every week, is just share some really easy little things along the way. So you can always join me there as well.
Mhm. They do want recipes. Sometimes I'll, take a picture of something I'm eating for lunch or something, and I'll put it up on Instagram. And the first thing people says is, "How do you make that? How much of this? How much of that?" They want specifics. I'm just saying, here's an example of a body ecology meal, and I'm not even sure how I made it. I mean, I don't measure things; I just intuitively cook. But they
Well,
do
I
want
I was
precise.
trained. I used to cook that way, and then when I did my cookbooks with Penguin Random House, the Blender
Oh
Girl,
yeah,
Your
you have to
Smoothies,
have.
and the Perfect Blend, I've got 3 books with Penguin Random House. Boy, was I trained. We measure everything, level
Yeah.
measure everything. All my recipes have been tested over 50 times before they're put on my website, my programs, or in my cookbooks, because you want to make sure that they work, right? That's
Hmm.
my pet peeve when I make some recipes. They don't work. And it's like, no, they have to work, right? So if you
Hmm.
level measure the ingredients, you just follow the instructions, the recipes work, and they're really, really easy, right? So definitely head over to theblendergirl.com.
Well, it's in there. And Tess, first of all, thank you. And thank you for the years of support for telling people about body ecology and understanding it. I'm so grateful for that. But
Oh, my Body
thank you
Ecology
for
changed my life. I had a first edition copy of your book. And
college.
yes,
It's
and we
big
here.
and old. It's
Yeah,
big.
yeah. Oh gosh, years, decades ago, and I had a lot of the same history. I had a macrobiotic background. I tried a lot of different kinds
Oh,
of
I didn't know that.
diets. A lot of the different conclusions that I had come to, and the things that I were doing, were so many of the things that were in body ecology. So no, it totally changed my life, and I have sent thousands of people to body ecology, and it has changed their lives as well. So it is hands down
Thank
the
you.
best anti-candida protocol in the world, and so great for autoimmune conditions and health conditions. And even if you just want to achieve better health, it's an amazing protocol, and I just love it so
Ooh,
much. So yeah,
you
great.
just reminded me of something. I have to say this before we get off. Um, so that book that I wrote years ago was to help people with candida. And then it became what people call paleo, just very low carb and so on. But fast forward somewhere along the way, I realized that it had to be adapted if you had a viral infection. And so if you get like the seasonal flu, or like I've even had people, like one doctor who was in a wheelchair with MS, I told him about it. About 6 weeks later, he was out of that wheelchair and back to work already. It works really fast. So I began developing an antiviral diet instead of anti-candida. And within 2 weeks, Tessa, I'm going to send it over to you. And then, because then COVID came along and long haulers, and for all these years, people with the chronic fatigue, we realized that their symptoms are the exact same thing as long haulers. And so I think the book is really excellent explaining what's going on with these viral infections, why you are a long hauler, why you have chronic fatigue. But most of all, is exactly how you have to eat. Not for long, 4 to 6 days. But it's a stricter version of body ecology, even though it's just a very short period of time because it starts working so quickly that your symptoms go away. I always like to explain to people, think of a virus like a dragon and is fire breathing and it's, Epstein-Barr, all the herpes viruses, CMV, these viruses never go away. They have a way to the ability to cloak themselves from the immune system, so the immune system never sees they're there. So I always like people to think, okay, you've got this dragon, he's living in his cave, and as long as he stays there, fine, then no problem. But uh, when your body comes too acidic, and this is the minerals and things we're talking about, then the virus comes out of the dragon comes out of the cave breathing fire, and then you got to get it back in. So believe it or not, you can do that very quickly within 10 days. If you're a long hauler, though, if you have chronic fatigue, the dragon can come back out at different times when you become too acidic. Then you'll need to go back on it for 4 days or something. But I'm really proud of this. I think it's going to be a game changer again in the world. And so I'm going to send it over to you. And then what you're doing is perfect for, like, what are you going to eat for the 4 days? Well, there are certain things, and what you're doing. Well, I can't wait for you to see it. And
Oh, I'm so excited.
maybe,
Send
yeah,
it. Oh,
maybe you'll have a recipe book or a course or something on how to use what you know, because it's exactly what you need to do to get the virus back in the dragon back
I
in the
mean,
cave.
yeah, definitely send it over. But I mean, I do think that's the key to making sustainable changes is you've got to love what you're eating. Healthy food has to be delicious and fun so that you're excited to eat it, and I think that's why there's almost 2 million people on the Blender Girl Facebook page, right? And why there's, hundreds of thousands of cookbooks have been sold. It's because people love the food, and the flavors. I love putting fabulous flavors together. Things have to be dimensional and delicious and beautiful, and the textures and the colors and everything has to be gorgeous, or things just aren't going to stick, right? So, really, really important stuff. So, yes, happy to help you with that. I love sharing recipes. So, thank you so much
And
for having me on. What a
it's
lovely
very
conversation.
plant based, as you said, plant rich. And one of the things that the COVID virus attacks is the mitochondria. And what the mitochondria need to get back online again are the polyphenols and flavonols and so on in plants. So this is a very plant based diet because you got to get your mitochondria producing energy again so you
Yeah,
can
I mean, there
heal.
are
So
energy
it's
factories. The
yeah,
mitochondria
exactly.
are energy factories in our body, right? So, what do they love the most? Plants, plants, plants,
Plants,
right?
plants, plants. So we're on the right path. I mean, we're the kind of people you want to follow, everybody. So, Tess, thank you, thank you, thank you for doing this, and we will
Thank
to
you.
be continued. We'll be
Always a pleasure.
talking soon.
Always great conversations. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.